Welcome to It's All Geek to Me, a podcast where two friends experience popular nerdy franchises for the first time. My name is Leah, and this season my co-host Kelli and I will be traveling to a galaxy far, far away as Kelli experiences Star Wars for the very first time. And I'm the expert. Let's dive in.
And we're back. But today we are starting a new movie in the Star Wars franchise. We've got Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi.
I realized in the last episode you didn't guess, or I didn't tell you what the name was. So when you saw it, were you surprised? Like, did it make you feel anything?
I would have had no idea. I wouldn't have even known what to guess because I wasn't sure that the Jedi were really gone because we already know a few Jedi. So how could they return?
But like Obi-Wan was in hiding, Yoda was in hiding, so Luke was the only one, and he's like a new generation. You know, he didn't get the formal training of a Jedi. He just got the abridged, potentially one day long training from Yoda.
1 hour of training with Yoda. But it did a lot for him,
apparently,
I gotta tell you.
Yeah, he's a whole new man.
Well, anyway, let's start from the beginning. We see another shot of a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And we get our opening crawl, which gives us a little bit of insight as to what has happened between the end of the last movie and where we're starting off today. So we find out Luke is back in his home planet Tatooine because he wants to rescue Han Solo, and the Galactic Empire is secretly working on a new armored space station which is supposed to be more powerful than the Death Star. And they said it spells certain doom, which I have to say, I was under the impression that they were building something new, but we almost immediately find out that it's the destroyed Death Star that's being rebuilt. So I don't know why they phrased it like that.
Well, I think it looks the same structurally, but it's somehow stronger than the other, you know. Maybe it's more enforced. They don't really specify, but yeah, it's essentially the same plans, but stronger.
I guess that makes sense because when we saw it, I was thinking it doesn't even seem that destroyed. I feel like they could probably just use it as is.
No, so that wasn't like the remains of the Death Star. That was like the progress that they've made on the new one.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense. Because I'm thinking they could have just done some shoddy repairs and just called it a day.
No, that other Death Star was totally destroyed.
So we see this, I guess, Death Star Part 2 being built, and there's a giant Star Destroyer that's approaching, and it lets out some little jets, and we hear the Darth Vader music. So we know that one of those little ships has Darth Vader in it. And somebody confirms it almost immediately. They say that Lord Vader's shuttle has arrived. So the soldiers line up to meet him, and Darth gets off the ship, and the commander is there to greet him, and he's like, oh, this is an unexpected but pleasant surprise.
And he's looking nervous.
I mean, wouldn't you be? He's kind of a scary boss to have.
Definitely.
When you get terminated from your job, you get terminated from life. And Darth basically is like, I'm here to keep you guys back on schedule because you are taking way too long. And the commander's like, my men are working as fast as I can. And Darth says something that I thought was incredibly ominous, which is, perhaps I can find new ways to motivate them. Ooh, that did give me a little bit of a chill because I was thinking that's going to be a torture situation.
Yeah, some sort of torture.
And then the commander basically admits that the task is impossible because he needs more men in order to do this, and that the Emperor just expects too much from these men in this time frame. And Darth is like, oh, well, you can tell him when he gets here. And the commander's like, the Emperor's coming here? And Darth is like, yeah, and he's not as forgiving as I am, which, again, absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, because at this point we haven't met the Emperor. We've just seen him on the projection.
We saw him in a hologram.
And that was it, yeah.
And he was pretty scary looking a little bit.
Yeah, didn't moisturize a lot in his life for sure.
Oh my gosh. So meanwhile, we cut to Tatooine, the beautiful desert planet, and we see our favorite droids, R2-D2 and C-3PO, are secretly evil droid, as I suspect. Listen, he did a lot of suspicious things in this opening scene, let me tell you.
I don't think he's suspicious. I just think he is a coward.
Evil.
He's just a coward.
No. I think he's programmed to be slightly evil is all I'm saying.
That's your interpretation.
That is my interpretation. Listen, in movie 9, we're going to find out that he is evil. And I'm going to be like, told you so. Because I can tell.
Finally, he becomes the emperor. Yeah.
So they're going to Jabba the Hutt's, I don't know, domain. And R2-D2 leads C-3PO to this big closed gate. And C-3PO does the lightest knock of all time. If he even knocks, I don't know. And he's like, oh, nobody's here. I guess we'll go back. Which I'm like, that's suspicious. Don't do that.
I knew that you were going to say something about that when I saw it happen.
And then this like droid eyeball thing comes out. And I don't know if C-3PO was giving fake names or if he was just saying their names in another language. Because he's like, this is R2-D2 or something like that.
Yeah, I think he was speaking their language.
Oh, okay. It's very convenient that he, for the most part, speaks in English. But I have to say, I was finding myself a little frustrated for a lot of this section because there are so many times where these people are speaking other languages and it's just not translated. And we just have to get the gist of it.
I kind of am okay with it. It doesn't bother me so much because like you can then just use the English speakers' responses as like your interpretation of what they said.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. But I'm just so big on knowing exactly everything that happens.
Yeah. I will say though, in this section, it was a lot of just alien language back and forth.
Yeah. And you're just like, all right, this is my educated guess of what they're saying.
Yeah.
But then C-3PO is like, oh, see, he's not going to let us in, which again, I was like, suspicious. And then he's like, let's just go home. But then the gate does open and R2-D2 heads in. C-3PO is very reluctant to go in, but he follows. And then R2-D2 is stopped by a pigman, which we love pigmen in this podcast.
Yeah, they're like these two boar-looking scary
Yeah,
dudes.
I mean, their faces are just
straight
100% boar face. Yeah. And there's a second one. He's kind of corralling C-3PO in. And then I wrote, oh my gosh, this weird man appears with a worm head because he kind of looks like a worm. Like his head is there, like a human head. But then on top of his head, there's a whole coil of worm, which, what is he?
I forgot the name of his race. Should I look it up quickly?
Yeah, look it up. Let's learn a little bit on the podcast.
Because I know his name is Fortuna.
I'm assuming he must be some kind of Hutt. Jabba the Hutt. That's not his name, right? That's like his Jabba the human.
Yeah, exactly. Jabba the human, Jabba the Hutt. Okay, so it says Bib Fortuna is a Twi'lek from Ryloth.
A Twi'lek from Ryloth. Yes,
how do we not remember
favorite.
that?
Yeah, no, I should have known that. I should have written that one down.
I always forget his name, and I definitely did not know his race. So
he was the one that was frustrating me the most because he was just speaking in another language. I tried to figure out exactly what was going on, but C-3PO tells him that he has a message and a gift for Jabba. And I wasn't sure at this point if C-3PO was implying that R2-D2 was the gift, because then Worm Man comes over and he like starts petting him and getting all hyped up about the gift. And R2-D2, not thrilled, he's beeping. And C-3PO is like, oh, he only wants to give it to Jabba the Hutt, so we have to see him specifically.
But I mean, it was a good guess that R2 was the gift because...
Yeah, that ended up being half true. So then they head into this little den club area where we find Jabba the Hutt. It looks like he's kind of smoking a hookah type of thing. And there is a lot of monsters at this club. And we see a little bit more detail of them, but we kind of just get a quick glimpse that it's this little shadowed hookah club kind of place. So R2-D2 comes up to him. He plays the message that Luke sent, which is a hologram of Luke introducing himself and requesting an audience to bargain for Han's life. And he says, as a gesture of goodwill, he is gifting both of the droids to Jabba the Hutt. And C-3PO is immediately pissed. He's like, wait, what? That's not the right message. And Jabba says there will be no bargain. He speaks a lot in between of this other language, but at one point it is translated. And it says, I like Captain Solo where he is. And then he points and it looks like he is a little little feature wall situation where he is hanging on the wall, frozen in carbonite, and everyone starts laughing.
Yeah, it's like he's like an art piece or something.
Yeah, honestly, kind of a cool art piece,
though. And I also like that in Luke's message, he says he's a Jedi. And, you know, a lot of people don't believe in the Jedi in this universe. So when he says he's a Jedi, Fortuna later then says... Worm Man says he's not a Jedi. So people really doubt the power of the Jedi and the power of the Force.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, anyway, we've got a very upset C-3PO and presumably an upset R2-D2 as well. And they are led into this kind of droid operating room. And there's a droid that asks C-3PO for his information, how many languages he speaks. And C-3PO says he speaks over 6 million forms of communication. And the droid says he'll be a good interpreter because the last interpreter got destroyed after Jabba the Hutt was annoyed with something he said. And C-3PO's like, what? Not an ideal situation. And then he gets led away.
And also, I wouldn't say it was so much a droid operating room as it was a torture room.
Oh,
they were like branding them. They were ripping their limbs off. I don't think they were operating on them. I think that they were
they were doing something weird in there.
Definitely torturing them.
My bad. But he is led away from R2-D2 and he's very upset about them getting separated again. And then the droid tells R2-D2 that first he says something like, you're feisty and I'm not into it. And then he's like, don't worry, you'll learn to be obedient. We've got room for you on the sail barge or something like that.
I like that we see like R2's personality too. Like everyone knows he's like the feisty, sassy droid.
You keep saying that.
You don't see
he's just beeping. I don't know if I'm fully on board with like the whole personality of R2-D2 yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
I see it.
Well, anyway, let's head back on into the hookah and jazz club as it turns out, because the aliens from the first movie are there playing some soothing jazz music. And there's also some harmonica, and there's a very interesting little dance that goes on with this girl who has a leash on.
And she's got those same worm things coming out of her head, but it's less weird looking on her because she's got the green skin, so it doesn't look as wormy.
Yeah, it's less wormy and more like snaky on her because of the green instead of the pale worm color. And then there is an incredibly long song that is sang for Jabba the Hutt.
What did you think of the song?
Well, first of all, the woman singing and then the guy kind of, I guess, assisting, two completely different graphics than the background. But I was like, why is this taking so long? We do not need this gratuitous song scene.
I do believe they were added in. Those two that looked differently CGI'd were added in later. And I don't remember fully. This is where my expert knowledge maybe fails me. So maybe one of the listeners can give a little bit more insight about this. But I believe that this song is not liked and this scene is not liked among the community, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So if anyone has insight...
You can go ahead and just add me in there amongst the community that did not like this song.
Yeah, it's definitely really silly.
It's just, it kind of downplays, I think, the seriousness of this club.
Yeah.
You know?
Because it's like a gangster club.
Yeah. Like, it almost makes you feel like it's kind of like a silly, goofy place instead of this club for all of these evil gangsters. You know? Like, why do we need this whole... It could have been a 10-second little
song
so long. Splice in. But it was so long. And also, in general, I know that you and I fundamentally disagree on this, but I do not love songs in movies.
Yeah, I know you hate it. For me, it depends.
Like, I just don't love musical moments.
But I love musicals. Like a straight musical, I like.
Oh, no. But during this song, Snake Girl, as I'll call her, because she's more snake-like than Worm Man, she, I guess, loops Jabba in on her leash chain and she starts trying to pull him and he's giggling, having a good time. And I'm like, is this a sexual thing that's going on or is she trying to hurt him? But I guess at the end of the day, she's just trying to hurt him. or choke him or something. But there's a trapdoor that he activates and she falls into. And then this monster comes out of the gate and we see it's basically like a fighting pit where it's like a fight to the death kind of pit. Although we do get to see the monster a little bit later in this section. And it's not so much a fight pit as it is a get eaten pit.
An eaten pit. It's a little unclear what happened there, but I think that Jabba was trying to pull her in and she was fighting back like, no, I don't want to go near you. And then he got mad and was like, well, then you can die.
Oh, I thought that she was trying to pull him onto the dance floor at first. And then I was like, wait, is this like a choking, like, I don't know, sensual thing?
No. I don't think it was
Oh, boy. Okay, I read that one wrong.
I think that she was like a prisoner of his.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, the chain kind of clued me into that part.
She just did not want to be near him.
And also, as we find out a little bit later, that he seems to like to dress up his prisoners a certain way, and she's dressed up that certain way. Ooh, we'll talk about that. But first, we hear what I wrote down as gunshots, but I mean, they're probably laser shots
pew.
Because
blasters.
You're always great at these blaster noises. And it is a bounty hunter that comes in with Chewbacca, our favorite Wookiee. And the bounty hunter says that they've come to claim the bounty. And I was immediately suspicious because I was like, Chewie's being way too calm. I have a feeling that this is another fake out situation, but I put that aside. I know, I'm brilliant. But I put it aside for a little bit just to see what would play out. And C-3PO is asked to translate the situation because the bounty hunter is speaking a different language. And Jabba the Hutt says that he will pay $25,000 for Chewie. And then the hunter has a counteroffer of $50,000. And Jabba gets mad at C-3PO for translating this and like knocks him over. And I guess he gets all sticky from it too, because when he comes back up, he's got this green goop on him.
Yeah.
And Jabba asks, and gets translated, why is he asking for so much? And the bounty hunter says that they have a thermal detonator and they're holding on to basically this bomb. And I'm assuming thermal part of it means that if they die or let go of it, then it's going to blow up so they can't be like shot or anything. Kind of like the dead man's switch. Yeah. And then Jabba laughs and he's actually kind of impressed. He says, this bounty hunter is my kind of scum, fearless and inventive. And then he offers $35,000 for it. And the hunter accepts and turns off the bomb. And the jazz music starts up again because there was a little tense silence when everybody was like, ooh, am I going to die?
And then music again.
Yeah. And then we also actually see a couple of suspicious looking people. We cut to somebody who I actually later found out, I believe is Boba Fett, but I thought that was potentially Luke or somebody in costume.
So that bounty hunter, I didn't want to mention it in the last film because they never say Boba Fett's name until Boba Fett dies. But that's the bounty hunter from the last movie who came for Han Solo. You called him like the astronaut looking man.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I did not catch that was the same person.
That is Boba Fett.
I feel like now I've written down Boba Fett he looks like a colorful version of Darth Vader a little bit.
Yeah.
That's Boba Fett? That's who you're into that character?
Not that I'm into that character. I just liked the candle because they drew Boba Fett as a woman and I liked that more.
Okay, well, yeah, so we do see a flash of Boba Fett, and then we also see Lando, who is secretly being one of the baddies. So then we actually get like a little scene of the day passing, and then it's like a much later type of situation where everyone is passed out in this club, which honestly,
it was funny.
Respect. Yeah. They partied so hard that they didn't even leave. And somebody is sneaking around, and I immediately wrote, this is definitely Leia, because, I mean, you can tell by the way she's kind of like walking around very daintily. And
she's so tiny.
The way that her body looks. Yeah. She's got a very small body.
It's just so obviously her.
So she goes over to the carbonite that is encasing Han Solo, and she lowers it down with this button thing, and it makes a really loud thud sound, but it seems like nobody's woken up. So then she keeps on going. She's changing some settings to presumably defrost him. And he starts to glow and melt, and he falls over, and then Leia, still in costume, picks him up, and he looks super messed up. He's super out of it, and he's like, what's going on? And Leia says, you have hibernation sickness, and Han says that he can't see anything, so he's temporarily blinded from this hibernation motion sickness. And she's actually using like a little voice changer at this point, so he can't tell it's her. But at this point, I kind of knew it was her. And she says, don't worry, the blindness is temporary. You'll get your sight back soon. And then Han says, who are you? And then she takes off her mask. Oh, I cringed at this part, I'm not gonna lie. She takes off her mask and she's like, someone who loves you. And then they immediately start making out, which I have an issue with because he was very sweaty and gross.
Ew, I know. And he couldn't see.
He couldn't see. And I was just like, ew, why are you doing this right? This is not the time.
This would have probably been a good time for Han to say, I love you too.
Well, I am just not a big fan of this moment. I feel like they could have done a good hug and that would have, been enough for me. The making out really grossed me out. But then Leia's like, let's get you out of here. And then we hear some evil laughter. And they turn around and Jabba and his crew are awake and they're just watching. And Han starts trying to talk to Jabba, but he's facing the wrong direction. And Leia kind of moves him to face Jabba the Hutt. A little bit of comedic relief there. And Han is trying to bargain for his life. And he's like, listen, I was about to pay you. I was actually on my way, but I got sidetracked. And Jabba's like, no. And Han is like, I'll pay you triple what I owe you. And Jabba basically says, it's too late. I'm going to kill you. As for Princess Leia, Jabba is like, oh, bring her to me. And Princess Leia says, you're going to regret this. And then he starts licking her? Question mark.
Ew, I don't know. Yeah, sniffing her, licking her, something weird.
Pretty disgusting. And we know what manner of prisoners he likes to keep now because that's a little suspicious. So then Han is brought into a cell and Chewie is there. Yay. And Chewie is so hyped to see him. So he hugs him and Chewie basically catches him up on what's going on and says it's a rescue mission. And Han is not thrilled because he's like, Luke can't even take care of himself. And Chewie's just so happy to see him. He keeps on like hugging him and petting him. And Han's like, I can't see. But Chewie's just not letting him not be a part of this embrace. And it's just really cute. I love their best friendship.
I know. They're so cute. Ugh, you have to see Solo. It's happening.
Happy.
You have to. If there's one extra movie.
Okay. Ooh, I'm going to ask you a question, but I don't want the answer. But is it a prequel?
You just told me you don't want me to answer.
Yeah. But I was hoping that from your expression I could guess, but you didn't make any faces. You're usually not great at keeping secrets.
Yeah, I know. You told me you didn't want me to answer, so I'm not going to answer.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just so curious. I don't know. Okay, well, you know what? I'm just going to assume it's a prequel.
After this film, I can tell you.
You can?
Anyway, Han also said something like, Luke says he's a Jedi. Oh, I get, locked up and now everyone's got delusions of grandeur. So it's another moment of people not really understanding the Jedi way.
Well, we also know that Han is a little bit of a skeptic and he's not really a believer in the Jedi, even though he's actually seen some of the magic. So I don't really know why he's not on board with it yet, but I'm sure he will be. Speaking of Jedi, we see the gate opening and an ominous figure enters along with some ominous music. And I immediately see that it is Luke and the pigmen come to stop him and he uses the Force to push them away. And then I wrote, OMG, Jabba has Leia in a bikini.
Yeah, I actually am curious your opinion on this costume.
I will say that I know of the costume. I know that it's like supposedly every man's fantasy costume and everybody always wants their partner to dress up like this. It's sexy because she's gorgeous, but it kind of grossed me out in the moment.
I agree though. For me, it's like, yes, objectively with no context, that is a very sexy costume. In context, it's a little off-putting to me.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
I mean, the costume itself is actually called the Slave Leia costume.
Oh my gosh.
Which I don't like. Yeah, no, I don't like it either.
I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, I agree.
On how we feel about it. So then Worm Man comes up to Luke, who is approaching this club, and Luke insists on being seen by Jabba. And I guess, I don't know if it is actually a Jedi mind trick that Luke uses, but Jabba is pretty annoyed because the Worm Man immediately agrees to let him see Jabba and is translating for him. And Jabba is like, don't fall for his Jedi mind tricks. So did he actually trick him into being seen?
I think so, because then when Luke talks to Jabba, I think he's continuously trying to use the Jedi mind tricks because he just says, you will bring Solo and the Wookiee to me. And I think that was plan A. Let's see if this works. And it didn't. And so plan B.
Yeah. And Jabba's like, that's not going to work on me. And then Luke starts threatening him and C-3PO tries to interrupt, and I knew that this was him trying to tell him about the trap door, but Jabba interrupts C-3PO's interruption, and he says, I will enjoy watching you die. And then Luke uses the Force to grab someone's blaster, and he tries shooting, and
I hear that.
By the way, in case anybody hears any background sound from me, my neighbor decided that this is a really great time to cut his tree down in his backyard. Yeah. So that's going on. It's been going on for a while, but
we're on a schedule here, so we're just going to keep going.
We're on a schedule. But anyway, so then in that moment, while Luke is trying to shoot, the trapdoor opens, and I guess another guard, soldier, bad guy, whatever, falls in with him, but they fall down to the pit below, which has the monster. And we do actually find out his name is the Rancor.
Yeah, scary guy.
And he is a really big monster, like big enough that he can just pick people up with his hand, and people are basically the size of his hand. And Luke grabs this monstrously big bone to fight off this monster, and this monster is just way too big, so he does grab him, and then Luke shoves the bone into his mouth in that kind of trick that you see in a lot of fantasy where it like keeps the monster's mouth from closing, which I was immediately like, why did he think this was a good idea? This monster has opposable thumbs. He can just reach into his mouth and take it out. But he didn't. He actually like smashes it closed. Yeah.
But I think the concept of it is his mouth is as wide as it will go, but the bone is behind the teeth. So he can't actually get it out. He's got to break it.
Okay, I guess that makes more sense. Listen, I'm just trying to poke holes in this movie.
Don't worry, many holes can be poked.
Okay, great. So then this little battle ensues, which is basically Luke just trying to fend for his life. And he hides in this little crevice, and then he scrambles out of it. He runs to this door that he opens, but it turns out that there's this like grate over the door, so he can't escape through that way. And the giant Rancor monster is coming towards him, and Luke sees this little switch panel, and he looks down, he sees a rock, which at this point, again, I'm like, why didn't he just use the Force? But he does pick up the rock and he throws it, and that causes the gate to fall, and it falls onto the monster. And then these other guys just run in. This was honestly the weirdest part of the section to me, because these guys run in and just start crying that the Rancor is dead, and they're absolutely devastated. And then Jabba's pissed off about it. He wants Han and Chewie to suffer for this, so he's calling them over. And I don't think I mentioned this, but in the midst of the tension of this scene, we also see Princess Leia trying to see what's going on, and she has a collar and a chain on her, and she keeps on being pulled back by Jabba. So she is really very helpless in this moment. So then we get Han and Chewie out, and we have a funny little moment between Han and Luke where Han's like, oh, hey, how's it going? And Luke's like, oh, same old. And Han is like, oh, that bad. So they're just kind of used to it at this point. And then C-3PO is translating again for Jabba the Hutt, and he explains that Jabba wants them to be terminated immediately. And he tells the story about this creature that will eat them alive and take 1,000 years to digest them. So it's like a whole new world of pain.
It's called the Sarlacc, and they're going to the pit of Carkoon, but it is also known as the Sarlacc pit.
Ah, the Sarlacc pit. That is right. So that's where they're headed to, and Leia still struggling against her leash, and I just wrote, oh Lord, this is
too much. Yeah, I agree.
It's just a little, I don't know, it like kind of grosses me out in this context, you know?
I think it's a little gratuitous, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. And I know some information. I don't know if we talked about it in this podcast, but I remember seeing something about how the director wanted Leia to, or Carrie Fisher, I guess, to not wear a bra because he's like, women don't wear bras in space. And that was like a point of contention between them. And that's what I was thinking of during this moment. I was just thinking like very gratuitous slave moment of her in a bikini.
Carrie Fisher, I will say, was definitely over-sexualized in these films, 100%. It was the first film actually was the whole bra situation and that like white dress that she's wearing. She's like taped in there, but she's not wearing a bra because George Lucas said you can't wear bras in space because the wiring will strangle you.
Is that true?
No. Come on, that's just
just a mansplaining.
But she has this famous quote about her obituary that I'm going to read to you.
Read it to me.
Now, I think that this would make for a fantastic obit, so I tell my younger friends that no matter how I go, I want it reported that I drowned in moonlight, strangled by my own bra. I love her so much.
I love that. No, definitely in the first movie, I didn't sense that she was over-sexualized, and I think the same in the second, but in this movie so far, I definitely had that thought occur to me a few times, that there was some gratuitous shots that I didn't think were necessary. In fact, there was one shot, for whatever reason, just of like the plane of her stomach and her legs.
For no reason.
And I was like, why did they include that?
Yeah.
I always try to think in like the film sense, every single shot has a meaning, right? And I was just like, what is the meaning of this shot? That she's hot?
Yeah, pretty much.
So then they head on over to the Sarlacc pit. Is that what you called it?
Yeah.
And we've got these little ships. They're flying over the desert. We see a shot of R2-D2 serving drinks, which I thought was actually
so
really funny because that is his job. And Jabba is there with his new pet, Leia, and they're watching out the window at this smaller ship, which is carrying the prisoners, which is Han and Luke and Chewie. And Han is saying that he can start to see a little bit because everything was a dark blur before, but now it's a light blur. So that's a good sign. And then Luke is like, oh, there's nothing to see. I actually used to live here. And Han is like, oh, how convenient, because you're actually going to die here too, which I thought was great. I love Han's quips.
Their banter has been really good in this film, in this section specifically.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then they're taken to the Sarlacc pit. There's like this plank, so it's kind of like a pirate ship situation. And Leia is still struggling against Jabba the Hutt, and he says, you'll learn to appreciate me, which I was really grossed out by that line. Very gross. And then C-3PO translates and explains that Jabba wants the prisoners to beg for their life. And Han responds really savagely, and he's like, we're not begging. And he calls him a bunch of names. And then Luke says, Jabba, it's your last chance to free us, which I thought was actually pretty funny because, I mean, Jabba's not going to free them just for saying, like, this is your last chance to free us. I also actually want to make a note before we get into all the crazy action of this scene, because this is something that I only noticed at this point when he's walking the plank, that Luke is wearing all black, and he basically has the same uniform on as he wore in the first two movies, which is kind of just like that futuristic tech wear kind of vibe with like the flowing shirt and stuff. He's got the same exact outfit on, but it's black. And I thought that was very significant because to me, reading into it, like the meaning of everything, I would think that that means that he is starting to flirt with the dark side a little bit, because why would he all of a sudden start wearing black unless he was feeling a little bit dark?
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's a great interpretation. And he's so much more stoic in this film too.
Yeah, a lot more serious. And honestly, I like him a lot better in this film so far. He's significantly less whiny. I feel like he's really starting to come into his own, I guess. And it's just very impressive. So we also get this very impressive moment of him, you know, starting this rescue plan where I don't know if he jumped per se off the plank, but he actually ended up catching it and then pulling himself back up, doing a cool little flip.
Little parkour moment.
Yeah, very cool. I loved it. Then he grabs his lightsaber and he just starts lightsabing
And the
away.
lightsaber came from R2, had it hidden.
Oh,
yeah.
Really? Oh, I didn't even notice that. So maybe he used the Force to grab it.
I think that R2 is part of the plan. There was a part earlier where C-3PO and R2 run into each other and C-3PO knocks over all of R2's drinks. And R2's like, hey, you knocked over all my drinks. And C-3PO is just being his normal self, saying like, you know, it's never going to work. And then R2's like, no, I trust Luke. So R2 was a big part of the plan.
So then this major fight breaks out and basically the prisoners take over the mini ship. There's a second little mini ship there. And at one point during all of this, Luke actually jumps over to it and starts fighting people on that ship. Leia decides that this is a great moment amidst all the chaos to start fighting Jabba the Hutt.
Yes.
So she actually starts choking him with the chain that he is using to leash her.
See, that's a powerful shot. That I love.
Yeah, that was very cool. And actually, I always watch movies with subtitles on. And when he finally dies, I actually don't think I would have been absolutely certain that he was dead unless I saw this subtitle. But it did say the noise, like he was croaking as he was trying to breathe. And it said death rattle. And I was like, ooh, okay, so he is for sure dead. Love to see it. And Lando, I don't know if I mentioned this, but Lando was actually one of the soldiers who was pretending to cart Luke and them out to be eaten alive by that Venus flytrap guy. And he takes this opportunity to start fighting as well. And he actually falls over. He starts falling into the pit. And Han and Chewie try to get him. So Han is reaching out. He, I guess, falls over too, and Chewie grabs him. So it's kind of like this human chain where they're trying to grab onto Lando. And the Sarlacc actually grabs Lando with one of its tendrils. And then Han is like, Chewie, give me the blaster. And Lando's like, wait, didn't you say you can't see? And Han's like, no, I'm seeing a little bit better now. It's totally fine. And Lando's like, wait, don't shoot. A little bit higher. So he's freaking out. It's very funny. But Han does manage to shoot the tendril, rescues Lando. So all is well there.
Have we seen Boba Fett yet at this point, or has he said Boba Fett's name? Because it's all so fast, I can't.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly at which point during this fight, but somebody does say Boba Fett is here. And then I don't even remember who was like, wait, did you say Boba Fett is here? And then we just cut to him.
It was Chewie said Boba Fett is here, and then Han says, wait, Boba Fett's here, and then Boba Fett falls into the Sarlacc. I don't really know what the purpose of this was, because like Boba Fett was this whole character in the last film that just didn't have a name.
Wait a second. So Boba Fett died in that scene?
I mean, maybe.
Oh my gosh, I did not even catch that he fell, because it's so hard to tell who is the person who's dying in each moment, because there was a few shots of like the plant eating different soldiers.
No, Boba Fett fell in.
Wow, okay, yeah, that's actually hilarious, because one, that's such a big name that I would think would be like a main character. They didn't even say his name in the last movie. I was calling him Astronaut Man, and I honestly thought he looked different.
I kind of think that he was supposed to be a faceless character. Like he was just like, oh, this is the bounty hunter. And then he became popular. And I just think because he was popular, then George Lucas gave him a name and a little feature in this last film.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, fun. R.I.P. Boba Fett. Good times were had. So then we see Leia, who has killed Jabba the Hutt, and she rescues R2, who then rescues C-3PO. I didn't mention this because it was really not important, but it kept on popping up. But there was this little like monster pet guy that kept on panning to him.
He's like an evil little rat.
Yeah, he would just be like, and I was just thinking like it's like the little like evil hairless cat that like the villain pets. And he has like a little beak and he's like pecking out C-3PO's eyeball. But R2-D2 blasts him and saves him. And then they jump off the ship. So they're in the sand somewhere. And then Luke gets onto the main ship. He's fighting with somebody. He actually gets shot in the hand.
Does it count?
Yeah, which I'm going to count.
All right, we're on 7.
I'm going to say
for the hand counter.
I'm going to say we're on 7 now because it wasn't shot off, but it was shot at. And at the time that it happened, I actually forgot that he had a robot hand. So they didn't have the grand moment that I mentioned in the last episode. I absolutely love when you find out that someone's got a robot part and they're like, just kidding, I'm not hurt. And then they kill you. But he does end up slashing the guy with his lightsaber, so it's fine. Then he grabs Leia and they get back onto the ship that they kind of commandeered. And Luke is like, all right, let's get out of here. Don't forget the droids. So Lando is piloting the ship. They grab the droids and then the main ship explodes as they're flying off. And then we immediately cut to them in spaceships. So we see the Millennium Falcon and we see Luke in a little fighter jet thing flying away. And I originally wrote, I have no idea how they got to these ships, but I guess because they all had a plan, that the ship was probably hidden somewhere nearby.
Yeah, they had an escape plan.
And then we also see Luke kind of taking a peek at his hand and we see all of the metal bits. And I was just a little sad that we didn't get my favorite, very specific trope.
And also in the transport, we get Han and Leia over the comm. Han thanks Luke for coming after him. And then they say, we'll meet. I don't think they said rendezvous point, but I think he basically said, I'll see you back wherever we're supposed to meet. But then he says to R2, we're going to Dagobah. So we know he's going back to Yoda.
So I actually didn't really notice that part, but I'm always missing stuff because I'm frantically trying to write down everything that's happening. But I'm very glad that I have you here to kind of guide me.
I mean, we do see Yoda in this section too, but Luke mentions it in this scene.
Yeah, no, I found out almost immediately where he was going because after this little section, we see the Bog Planet, as I keep calling it.
And then back to the Death Star.
So meanwhile, we cut back to Death Star version 2.0, and somebody has just arrived on a ship and everyone's lined up to see him. And I actually thought it was interesting because in the first part of this section, when Darth Vader arrives, there was a bunch of soldiers and stormtroopers lined up to see him. And I thought that that was everyone at the time. But in this case, for this arrival, it's like everyone, like tons of soldiers and stormtroopers. Yeah. And then these red-robed soldiers come out of this ship, and then Darth comes over to the ship and he bows at the front, and it's the Emperor who comes out, and he is this old, short guy with a cane. And Darth starts walking with him, and he says that the ship is going to be fixed on schedule, and the Emperor is like, oh yeah, I bet you want to keep searching for Luke Skywalker. And Darth pauses for a minute, and then he's like, yeah, I do. Which I thought was actually great. And then the Emperor says, patience, my friend, in time he will seek you out. And then he goes on to explain that when he does, he needs to bring Luke to the Emperor because only the two of them together can turn him to the dark side because he's getting a little bit too strong to be swayed on his own. So that's all we see so far of the Death Star people. Yeah. But we do cut back to the planet with Yoda, and Yoda says he's gotten sick and he's old and weak, and he says he's 900 years old, but he's actually very good humored about it because he's like, when you're 900 years old, you're not going to be looking so hot either. Yeah. Which I think is really cute. And I did have the initial shock again of hearing his voice, but I am warming up to Yoda a lot because I think he's pretty much a cutie.
He was pretty cute in this scene. I will say, like, sometimes I cry during the scene. I did get a little emotional. I didn't cry, but like what stops me from crying is how much humor and acceptance Yoda has about his death. He's like, I'm over this. I'm 900. Let me sleep.
Yeah. He says it's time for his eternal sleep, and he says he's earned it, which I think is a very cute way to think of death. You know, he's lived this long life. He has earned the opportunity for eternal rest, you know? And Luke is like, well, wait, you can't die.
In this scene, Luke is so just self-centered. He's like, you can't die. I
need you.
I need you.
And Yoda's just like, listen, it is what it is. I'm about to die. And Luke is like, but wait, you have to keep training me. And Yoda is like, well, actually, you don't need more training. You already know everything that you need. And then Luke is like, oh, so I'm a Jedi? And then Yoda starts cracking up.
Like, no.
And he's like, what? No, not even a little bit. And he says, you have to confront Vader, and then, and only then, you can be a Jedi. And then Luke is like, is Darth Vader my father? And then Yoda's like, time to rest. And then he turns away, which I thought was great. But then they have a little back and forth, and he does admit that Darth is his father. And he says it's very unfortunate. And Luke immediately gets a little defensive, and he's like, it's unfortunate that I know the truth. And Yoda says, no, it's unfortunate that you rushed to face him when you weren't ready for this burden. And Yoda says to remember that a Jedi's strength flows from the Force, but he has to beware of anger, fear, and aggression because they will lead him to the dark side. And once you start down the dark side, it will dominate your destiny. And he says, Luke, do not underestimate the powers of the Emperor or suffer your father's fate, you will, which I thought was very cool. And then he also says a little bit more. At this point, he's clearly dying, so everything's coming out very slow, but basically what he says is that when he's gone, Luke is going to be the last of the Jedi, but the Force runs strong in his family. And at first I was thinking, okay, so he's saying he's got to have kids, but then he says there is another Skywalker, and then he dies and he disappears.
Yes, and he disappears. Oh, our little Yoda.
And at first Luke is pretty stoic about it, but then we see him walking back onto his ship and he's looking a little sad.
So did you know when Yoda said there is another Skywalker that it was going to be Leia in that moment?
No, not at all. And I have no idea how he was able to pick it up so quickly, you know? I don't think I would have, unless I knew the spoiler, but I don't think I would have just been like, oh yeah, it's definitely Leia. I was thinking, I know that there are other movies, and I know that there's a girl who's like a Jedi in another movie. I don't know if it's in the prequel or the after movies. And I was thinking, oh, maybe it's that girl.
No, that's why I was wondering, because you said you knew the spoiler. So I was like, oh, maybe you realized it. But I mean, obviously, then in this next scene with Obi, we find that information.
Yeah. So then Luke goes back to his ship. He's a little sad, and he's like, I can't do this alone. He's talking to R2-D2. And then we hear Obi, our pal Obi, say, Yoda will always be with you. And then Luke gets immediately pretty mad at Obi, and he's like, why didn't you tell me about my dad? You lied to me. And Obi said that Darth Vader stopped being Anakin Skywalker when he turned to the dark side and he became Darth. So technically, he didn't lie. He was telling the truth in a way.
He was gaslighting him so much. He's like, I'm just telling the truth from a different point of view.
And Lucas is not thrilled with him because he's like, dude, what? That's not cool. You can't say it like that. And then Obi starts talking a little bit more about his dad. And he says Anakin was a good friend. He was a great pilot. And Obi taught him how to be a Jedi. And he says that it kind of got twisted and ruined. And Luke says there's still good in him, which I thought was really interesting because what basis does Luke have to go off to say this?
I think, he just gets so obsessed with Vader being his father just because they're blood related. And I guess he always wanted to meet him. So now he's just like projecting this goodness. He must be good because he's my father. And how can my father be bad? Little in denial, maybe.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think being raised by his aunt and uncle, he's probably felt really lost for a lot of his life and kind of, wishing that he knew his father. And now he feels like maybe he has an opportunity to know him and is just being very wishful, thinking that there's got to be good in him, like you said, because he's my dad. So then Obi says he's more machine now than man, twisted and evil. And I also thought this was interesting. Maybe I'm looking too far into it, but I don't know what parts of Darth are machine. But we know at this point now that Luke's arm is machine. So is there an opportunity potentially for Luke to become more machine and become less human and potentially go to the dark side?
Well, I guess if he loses more limbs, maybe it's possible.
Oh my gosh, do you think he will? Maybe his other arm, since they're big on arms here.
Very big on arms.
So then Luke says, I can't do it. And Obi's like, you can't escape your destiny. You have to face Darth. And Luke is like, but I can't kill my father. And Obi says, then the Emperor has already won. And Luke is like, well, Yoda actually said there was somebody else.
So maybe I don't have to do anything.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to kill my dad, but maybe somebody else can do it. And Obi is like, oh yeah, your twin sister. And Luke is like, I don't have a sister. And at this point I was like, oh no, it's Leia. And they've made out.
I mean, they haven't made out. They've like pecked a few times.
They've kissed. And so Obi says basically that they were hidden from their father when they were born to protect them. And that's why his sister was safely hidden away. And I was like, oh, I'm just cringing this entire section because I just can't stand the thought of him having had a crush on his twin sister. Ugh.
I am under the belief that when Star Wars Episode 4 came out, Luke and Leia were not supposed to be siblings.
Oh my gosh, really?
I have that thought. I'm not 100% sure. I've never looked it up myself, but I think it was an afterthought.
Well, it's definitely an interesting conflict to throw in there,
yeah.
You know? But I mean, at this point, I don't think that we're dealing with any lingering feelings that Luke has for her because we haven't seen him really pine.
No, I think he seemed really excited to find out that she was his sister.
That's actually where we ended this section.
How did you like it comparatively to the last film so far? Like, do you like the setup of it?
I'm very much enjoying it. I mentioned in the last episode that I absolutely loved episode 5. I thought it was incredible, especially the final third of the movie just blew me away. And I think we're really continuing in that vein. I haven't found myself bored, which I did find happening a couple of times in the first movie with like the battle flying scene and then in the beginning of the second movie. But in this case, I am just coasting. I'm having a great time. I'm very curious to see what goes on, especially with Luke and the dark side, because I really think something's going to happen there.
I agree, though. Like, I think this section flows really nicely. It's got a good pace. It's not boring. It's all really exciting. And you get, you know, the main cast is dealing with this little side quest that they need to do before they can get back to fighting the dark side. But then you see everything that Vader's doing. We meet the Emperor. Yeah, I think it's a really exciting section.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah. So now this is the final movie of the original trilogy, right? So things are probably going to get wrapped up with this main cast, I assume?
I mean, think about, so the first Star Wars film, I believe, came out in 79. So we're in the 80s. I think maybe 83. I could be wrong about that. I'm not 100% sure when this film came out. But after that, the next Star Wars movie doesn't come out until, I believe, 2001. So I don't think there was much plan after this. So yeah, this is a very concise trilogy. We get a nice wrap up at the end, you know, like.
Oh, then I'm so excited and a little nervous. I hope nobody important dies. That would make me sad.
Yes,
oh
we'll
no.
see.
Oh, someone's gonna die. But it's not gonna be Luke.
I don't know.
Can't be Luke. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, maybe in the next episode I'll make some predictions if there's gonna be any like major character deaths. Unless they happen in the next session, then I won't make any predictions. But having fun so far, and we'll continue with the second third of the movie next Thursday.
Yes. See you next Thursday.
Bye.
Bye. You've been listening to the It's All Geek to Me podcast, hosted by Leah and Kelli. Make sure to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player and give us a rating. You can also follow us on Twitter at All Geek Podcast. New episodes drop every Thursday. See you next week.